our district attorney, Brooke Jenkins, and our member of District 6 Board of Supervisors, Matt Dorsey. Today, we are here to talk about what has been really very frustrating for all of us, especially the people who live in the Tenderloin and Soma community, the open-air drug dealing that is destroying our city. I've been out and about a lot and have talked to so many people, especially a lot of people who live in the Tenderloin and people who I grew up with. People are angry with what they see and experience, the brazen drug use and sales during broad daylight. We know what's at stake. The sale of drugs on our streets, they're killing people. And open-air drug markets are disrupting neighborhoods and residents. In fact, we've had more overdose deaths since the start of a global pandemic than we did COVID deaths. Kids are walking by things that they shouldn't see on their ways to school. No one should have to see or experience that. And this doesn't even include some of the violence which we know has been extremely problematic. I know there are so many who are struggling with addiction. And this is a city of compassion, so of course we want to help. We have been balancing our work around expansion of services and treatment for them. At the same time, we need to firmly establish what's acceptable conduct on our streets and in our public spaces. San Francisco has to draw a firm line at behaviors that harm, that injure, and cost neighborhoods peace of mind, everyday safety, and quality of life. And part of that means we must be more aggressive with arrest and prosecution for the organized criminal operations that are flooding our streets with the drugs and the violence that in some cases have led to people losing their lives. The driving of drugs, especially fentanyl, into our city is going to require all levels of government working together, including enforcement against those dealing drugs. It's going to require our police working with the district attorney and the board of supervisors, working with the various city agencies, us soliciting support and help from our federal government, which we are doing. This is a hard issue, but I want to be clear that the leaders of this city are finally working together the way that they should in order to address it. Police Chief Scott is going to provide details on some of the data and the department's strategies. District Attorney Brooke Jenkins will also talk about what her office has been working on, and Supervisor Matt Dorsey has been a strong advocate for public safety, not just in the district he represents, but also other neighborhoods in the city. He's been both supportive of law enforcement and health approaches to addressing this issue. And this does require a public health approach as well. Over the last year, we've connected 4,500 people to services for substance use in San Francisco across our behavioral health system. And we are 2/3 of the way to adding 400 additional treatment beds, making it nearly 2,200, adding that to 2,200 that already exist. The Public Health Department is setting clear goals to increase the number of people who are medically assisted treatment that will help them get off opioids. On top of the shelter, housing, and other places we are creating for people struggling on our streets. These investments are designed to create solutions that can get people off the streets into safe settings and ultimately stability. And we won't stop until we get to that ultimate goal where we are constantly adapting our strategies so that no neighborhood should be responsible for living in the conditions like the ones we see sadly in the Tenderloin. Every community, our residents and merchants, deserve a clean and safe neighborhood. Because let's be clear, selling drugs is not legal. Using drugs out in the open is completely unacceptable. So yes, public health is a part of this enforcement effort, but we have to be moving together in the same direction, and that's why it's so important that we have our police chief, our district attorney, member of the board of supervisors all here working together. Chief Scott and the officers of the San Francisco Police Department have been making the arrests. They've been seizing the fentanyl off the streets. They've been interrupting the open air drug dealers and confiscating deadly substances as we're building strong cases against those criminals who are profiting from street level drug sales. And they have a partner in our district attorney who is sending a strong message around accountability and who's working with our officers to build strong cases. This matters, it really does, because that partnership isn't about them, it's about what they are doing together to help the people who are struggling in our city, especially, again, the folks in the Tenderloin. When our police officers make an arrest, there needs to be consequences for the seniors, for the immigrants, for the kids who are trying to just live their lives and do some of the basic things that we take for granted. We're working on every option to get people the help they need, and we must hold those who continue to bring harm to our streets accountable for what they're causing, the significant damage. Standing with everyone today, I'm confident that our public safety agencies will work more closely. Together, we'll make a difference for our residents and our workers and our visitors. And with that, I want to take an opportunity to introduce Police Chief Bill Scott, who's worked with his command staff and everyone in the department to make sure that our foot beats, our patrols, our officers are responding to calls. We know we have a lot of work to do, but it's truly important that we support law enforcement in this city, because ultimately we have to make significant changes, and that means we have to make sure that there are consequences when people break the law in San Francisco, and that's what we're going to continue to do to make our streets safer. And with that, Police Chief Bill Scott.
Thank you, Mayor Breed, and good morning, everybody. First of all, I just want to say thank you to the mayor, our district attorney, Brooke Jenkins, Supervisor Matt Dorsey, for the partnership. You heard the mayor talk about doing this together, and this is only a small fraction of the city team that is working hard every day to address this issue. We want to make sure that everybody understands the unity and the solidarity and the commitment of city leaders to make this situation better. This is about saving lives. This is about protecting the people who work, live, play in this city. And this is about protecting our great city. I want to talk a little bit about the balance that we're trying to achieve here. The police department's role is enforcement, but it goes way beyond that. This city is known for compassion. This city is known for reaching out and helping people who need help. This city is known for trying to balance what needs to be done on the enforcement scale and what needs to be done to get people who want and need help to a better place. Our role, the San Francisco Police Department and the officers that are out there in the streets, starts with what we are here for, and that is enforcement. But we are also here to treat people with dignity and respect, and to try to make connections with all the resources and the city family to get people to a better place. And we are doing both. This is also about working more effectively, working more efficiently, and always evaluating what we are doing and can we do it better. This is something that Mayor Breed stresses on a daily basis. And we are responding to that direction to work more efficiently and effectively. I want to talk a little bit about how we plan to do that. We've made over 600 arrests, narcotic-related arrests, and the majority of those have been for sales, possession for sales. The police department and our officers have to give the district attorney the evidence that she and her team needs to prosecute cases. And if we do our jobs, we can have the very accountability that we're looking for. There has to be consequences. There has to be accountability. We cannot be the city where people think that they can come to San Francisco, or if they live in San Francisco, and just do whatever they please, and nobody's going to say anything or do anything. And I guarantee you, we are not that city. We are committed to accountability and consequences. In addition to those 600 arrests, a part of our readjustment is we realized that we had to do more to address the people who need help, and I'm talking about the people who are the most addicted. I've been doing this job for a long time, and every situation where we have groups of drug dealers on the streets, what closely follows that are people who are addicted, have some type of substance abuse disorders, and they are operating in tandem. We have to address both sides of that equation. We can't just arrest the dealers and then leave the people who are buying the drugs alone to do as they please and think that this is going to get better. It's a tough balance to do that, because at the same time, we respect harm reduction. We want to make sure that people who are addicted aren't using dirty needles and aren't using dirty pipes and spreading HIV and tuberculosis and those types of things to make a public health issue even more complicated. However, that doesn't mean that people who are addicted get a free pass, because the criminal justice system has tools to get to that issue. This city leads with services. We truly do lead with services. Our officers, when they come in contact with people who need help, they are directed to try to get them to help. Not everybody wants help. Not everybody is ready for help. And when they are still addicted, they're going to buy drugs and they're going to use drugs. And what we've seen and what we have to put a stop to is that's happening in broad daylight in the middle of the street, where kids get to see it, families get to see it. Those things harm our communities just as much as violent crime, just as much as property crime, and we have to do more, and that is our commitment to do more. Now, our officers started in June of really upping the game of addressing that issue. Over 350 citations for people who are using in open spaces, in public spaces. Many of those people had warrants. Many of those people had stay-away orders from the courts. They weren't even supposed to be there in the first place. The district attorney will talk more about their policies on how to address that issue from her point of view and what they need to do. But what we need to do as the police department is do our jobs and make sure that people understand that that is not okay. And I have talked to many, many people in this city, and I don't care what side of this equation you're on, I have not heard anybody say that it is okay to smoke fentanyl in the middle of a street while kids are walking by, while families are trying to get to their daily routine. I have not heard anybody say that's okay. So if we're all in agreement, we should all be in agreement to do something about it. And that is what we are committed to doing. These operations and this enforcement will continue, and it has increased because we know the detrimental effects of harms to our community, that drug dealing, narcotics dealing. The Tenderloin is one community, but the Tenderloin has more deaths than any part of the city for drug overdoses. Our officers are out there using naloxone, and they're saving lives. The reversals is almost a daily occasion. Who knows what the overdoses that the mayor talked about would be if we weren't doing that, and all of the other partners that are out there trying to save people's lives. But we have to dig deeper. We cannot allow this to continue on our streets, and we will not allow this to continue on our streets. I'm going to close with just a personal story. This past Friday, myself and a couple of officers and a sergeant were at 8th and Mission. 8th and Mission is known for drug sales. It's known for addicted people hanging out. Supervisor Dorsey was a half a block away conducting a community cleanup. We had officers making arrests while I was out there for drug sales. We had needles spread out on the sidewalks. It had just been cleaned up a couple of hours before that. Public Works had just cleaned that corner up, and you would have never known it. I saw a little girl walking down the street with her mom, I'm assuming it's her mom, stepping over needles. Another little girl and her mom wanted to get on the bus. The bus shelter was packed with litter, with people using, with people passed out at the bus shelter. That's not okay, folks. it's not okay. Now, we got it cleaned up within about an hour. Officers came, they cleaned it up. Arrests were being made as I was out there. Arrests were being made for sales. A couple hours later, back to the same. Here's the point to this story. This mayor, this district attorney, this board of supervisors, and many, many others, and this police chief are committed to trying to resolve that issue. Those bed spaces that the mayor talked about are vital. And one way that we plan to work it more efficiently is we are going to take away the excuses. We had trouble with getting people transported from street corners to places where they can get help because we didn't have transportation. That is no longer an issue. Working with public health, that is no longer an issue. Our job is to take away all of the excuses of why people can't and won't seek help. And then when they don't, that's when enforcement comes into play, and that's when the criminal justice system can leverage them to help to a better place. So expect more efficiency, expect this partnership to continue to grow and flourish, and expect our city to be the great city that it is and it should be. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our district attorney, Brooke Jenkins. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you to Mayor Breed, to Chief Scott, and to Supervisor Dorsey for their leadership on this issue and their partnership with my office. As you know, we've had over 1,700 overdose deaths in San Francisco since 2020. I promised the public the day that I was sworn in that I was committed to doing something to eradicate the open-air drug markets in San Francisco, and that I was committed to making sure that we restored accountability into the criminal justice system here in San Francisco. What we know is that the San Francisco DA's office over the last 2.5 years effectively decriminalized the sale of drugs, and we see the result of that out on our streets every single day. A part of my commitment and demonstrating my commitment to solving this issue was to immediately come in and to survey the situation with respect to what offers were being extended to those dealing drugs in our office, and to immediately revoke 30 lenient plea offers that I believed were excessively lenient for those who were selling fentanyl. My approach to dealing with the open-air drug markets has been that we have to have consequences. We have to make sure that our rehabilitative courts aren't being abused and misused by those who are dealers and not those who have substance abuse problems. I've announced over the last 2.5 months many policies with respect to the way that we're handling drug dealing cases going forward. We are now prohibiting those who have more than 5 grams of a controlled substance from entering into our rehabilitative courts, which should be reserved for those who actually need treatment. I've put enhancements back on the table for those who sell drugs within 1,000 feet of schools. I've made sure that we are no longer giving excessively lenient misdemeanor pleas and dismissals to those who are selling the most lethal drug that we've ever seen on this market. We've begun filing pretrial detention motions for those who have egregious sales cases, those who have picked up numerous fentanyl sales cases, those who are in possessions of quantities that could kill multiple neighborhoods in San Francisco in one shot. I've also announced a new policy that we will move forward with admonishing fentanyl sellers at the time of their arraignment about the lethality of fentanyl and helping them to understand that should they be connected to someone's death through the sale of that deadly drug, that they could be charged with murder. We are now in a crisis, as we know, and that crisis doesn't stop with the adults. I have a 6-year-old daughter that I just had to give a lesson to about what is now candy fentanyl that is on our markets. We are seeing overdoses in the school systems in California. This crisis has reached a point where, as you've heard this morning, we must, as city leaders, do something about it. And that's why I have taken this aggressive approach in my office. Since July 1st, we have filed 183 narcotic sales cases in my office, which is almost double what the previous administration filed in the same period of time. We've arraigned 157 individuals from July 1st to September 25th, representing a 100% increase in the number of arraignments for drug dealers in San Francisco during that same period of time last year. The charges don't tell the whole story, we know that, but they do help illustrate the fact that we are taking a more aggressive approach and that we are taking this issue seriously. And what the public will see is that on the back end of these cases, you will see accountability. With respect to the motions to detain, we have filed 9 of those motions, 2 being filed just yesterday. And we are continuing to advance new legal theories and arguments to make sure that the judges understand the dangers that these fentanyl dealers present to the public. As I said, in every single arraignment with respect to the sale of fentanyl, we are giving that admonishment regarding the potential for filing of murder charges should somebody's sale be connected to a death. I've also gone around to many of the police stations at this point to speak with the rank and file officers, those who are out on foot patrol actually making these arrests, just as Chief Scott just talked about. I've met with the foot patrol officers in the Tenderloin, at Southern Station here in Soma, to let them know that when they do their jobs at the highest level, when they make these arrests, that the DA's office is now willing to make sure that there is accountability in these cases, that their work is now valued in this criminal justice system and is essential and is what the public wants. I was out yesterday on Market Street and had a gentleman come up to me and tell me that just a few months ago, his wife died of a fentanyl overdose, that she had been in recovery, trying to stay clean, but with the amount of drug dealers out on the street that it was impossible for that to continue, and that is what ultimately led to her death. He implored me to do something about what's going on. And so yes, based on what everyone is saying around this city, as Chief Scott just pointed out, we have a job to do and we are willing to do it. With respect to the open air drug use, as I've said over and over again, we can't be a city that accepts people publicly using drugs on our street. As I drive around with my 2 children, how do I explain to them what's going on and that they shouldn't engage in drug use when it appears to be something that happens normally and regularly out in the open? What we've done with respect to the citations that the police department is issuing is to create a policy regarding bundling, that at the time somebody reaches a 5th citation from the San Francisco Police Department, that we will then file a complaint with those 5 citations and forward it to our Community Justice Center, which is designed to require them and help them engage in treatment. As Chief Scott said, we are a city of compassion, but compassion is not leaving people to languish on the street, potentially to die of overdose. It's using the tools that we have to propel people to change their lives. And what I know is that for all the people that I've met in recovery, many of them have said that it was the criminal justice system that got them on the road to staying clean. And I'm committed to using this system to help those who need that assistance do so. The reckless decisions that were made by the previous administration have cost San Francisco far too many lives. And those are not throwaway lives. Those are people's family members. It has impacted those families. It has impacted the business community here in San Francisco, and it continues to impact families who live in the neighborhoods most plagued by this behavior. I pledge, as I have before, that I will do everything in my power to help this city move forward, to eradicate this problem, and to make sure that all of our communities can live in peace and safety. And at this point, I will pass it over to Supervisor Dorsey. Thank you.
Thank you so much, District Attorney Jenkins, and thank you, Mayor Breed, for your leadership. And thank you, Chief Scott, for your leadership and your friendship and mentorship during the 2 years that I worked right here in this building. You know, it was a formative experience for me. I started as a civilian command staff member just a couple of weeks before the COVID emergency. And one of the meetings that I took part in for many months was with the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner and officials from the Department of Public Health to preview the monthly report on how many people died of drug overdoses the previous month. I am a person who is in recovery. I've been open about that. I identify as an addict and an alcoholic. I have spent most of my adult life in recovery, and I have had setbacks along the way, including recently. In fact, with one day at a time and with God's grace, Friday I may celebrate 2 years. It is personal to me, and it was personal to me to watch month after month a number of people who were San Franciscans who died of drug overdoses, knowing that I am also one bad decision away from being among that number, and knowing that we are seeing a public health crisis play out that was twice as deadly as COVID-19. That collective toll made me start thinking about the importance of having a voice and a perspective in city government from the substance use disorder recovery community. But if there was a moment that solidified my own thinking on why I wanted to ask for a job I never thought I would want, let alone have, it was when Mayor London Breed took on the important work of the Tenderloin Emergency Initiative and inspired me. It was a rancorous 10-hour debate over what was then the death of 1,300 San Franciscans and whether that was a sufficient emergency to give the powers that the city needed to move expeditiously on what we needed to do. And who knew? You know, I think when I shared with the chief that I wanted to say to the chief, hey, I just want you to know, I want you to hear it from me, because I'm not looking for a job. I really like this one. I like the one that I had. But there's a personal reason that I want to ask the mayor to consider me. And I said to him, but I'm going to be honest, I'd put the odds at about 5%. I didn't think it was going to work out, but it did. And I'm grateful that it did. Right after I was appointed, I went to work with Supervisor Raphael Mandelman and Supervisor Catherine Stephanie, and we reached out to some national experts in drug policy. Keith Humphreys from Stanford University is one of them. Mike Marshall from Oregon Recovers. Bo Kilmer, who was from the RAND Corporation, who did a lot of work with the Supervisor Haney's street-level drug dealing task force. And David Kennedy from the John Jay College of Criminal Justice National Network for Safe Communities, who's known from the Obama administration for his strategies around drug market interventions. And we identified cities that are doing successful jobs at addressing public health and public safety challenges around open-air drug scenes. Many of them are in Europe: Amsterdam, Lisbon, Frankfurt, Vienna. We looked at all the menu of things that other cities do, including some cities in the United States. And we put it together into a resolution. It's called San Francisco Recovers. And we basically identified all the city departments that would have a role to play if we were to implement all the things that we want to do. And our thinking about this, what we want to do, is really kind of flip the script a little bit on how we govern in San Francisco. You know, up to now, I think it's too often and too much the San Francisco Board of Supervisors can sort of function as the Board of Complainers. We'll try to propose things, and then let's see what we can do to complain why this isn't going to work. The Board of Supervisors is also charged with governing this city. And one of the lessons of every city that has done a good job at this is they have to get past the political rancor first. They have to get to some place of consensus, even if it's not universal, if there's just a majority opinion that we're going to get rowing in the same direction. And that's what I'm committed to do with San Francisco Recovers. We're asking 21 city departments and 6 city commissions that have a role to play in making sure that we are solving this in the way that we know that we can. And it was interesting. I'm encouraged by all the feedback that I've gotten from department heads. I have said to them that this is something I've spent most of my career on the other side of the Board of Supervisors. So I know what it's like when a member of the Board of Supervisors who thinks they know how to run a department better than you do And they'll say, here's some more responsibilities for you, and there's not going to be any funding for it, and then they're going to set you up for failure and make a big production about blaming you for failing publicly. I promised that I will never be that supervisor. I'm going to ask for the resources you need, and I'm going to fight for the resources you need. One of the things that I asked for was our city controller and city chief economist to produce a report that is going to give us a clear-eyed view of how much money we are spending on untreated drug addiction. Because when we go into budget next year, I want to make a forceful and effective case for what we need to solve the problem. If we're going to be talking about what the solution costs, I want to know what the problem costs, and that'll shift our thinking on where we're going to be putting resources as a board of supervisors. The other thing I want to make use of is some of the opioid settlement litigation money that City Attorney David Chu and former City Attorney Dennis Herrera have been so successful at getting. We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity of about $100 million over the next several years that we can spend, and I think the best, most prudent, and wisest way we can spend it is to make sure that we have a comprehensive strategy. Let's all get on the same page on an approach. I am working with community organizations from across the political spectrum, but we can do this. I refuse to accept that San Francisco, that was known a generation ago for the work that it did to work on the AIDS crisis, that heroic work, it was an approach that became known as the San Francisco model. It was so successful. I refuse to accept that a city that is nationally recognized for its leadership and how it handled COVID-19, that we can't do better on the drug deaths and the drug overdoses that we're facing. But the one thing I just want to close with, to understand what we're up against. The Tenderloin Police District keeps data, meticulous data, on how much fentanyl they're taking off the street from drug dealers. In 2020, the first year that I was here, Tenderloin cops, among the drug dealers they arrested, took 5.5 kilos of drugs off of those dealers. By 2021, that number went up to 25 kilos. It was about a little under fivefold. As we stand here today, by the end of this year, we are going to close in around 55 kilos of fentanyl. And to give you a perspective on this, 2 milligrams is a fatal overdose of fentanyl for most people. It's about enough to cover Abraham Lincoln's beard on a copper penny. 55 kilos of fentanyl that we're taking off the street by the end of this year is enough to wipe out the population of the San Francisco Bay Area twice over. The scale of drugs in this city is what the problem is. And we have to take a strategy, as we're trying to do with San Francisco Recovers, that brings everything we've got to bear on public health strategies, criminal justice strategies, what I'm calling right to recovery programs that will encourage and incentivize people to get into recovery, sober New Deal programs that will keep people there, incentivize them and give them purpose to stay in recovery and get to long-term recovery, and then enhance transparency. Because one of the things, whenever we look at this, we don't do a good job with technology tracking outcomes. We need to know where we're doing better and where we're doing worse so that we can do better moving forward. So I am incredibly grateful to be a partner with the mayor, with our district attorney, with the chief of police again, and with everybody. We can do better, and I really am optimistic about where we're going to go moving here. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Supervisor Dorsey. I'm really excited about what I know working together we will accomplish. These problems that exist in our city were not created overnight, and we know the solutions won't happen overnight. But what you have here are people who understand the challenges and are prepared to make the hard decisions about the solutions to move our city forward. We finally have someone who is a prosecutor serving as our district attorney. We have a commitment from our police department with our police chief. We have a member of the Board of Supervisors who understands intimately the challenges that people who are suffering with addiction face and the need to make sure that we balance the accountability component with supportive services and treatment. We're not losing touch with the fact that San Francisco is a compassionate and caring city. We understand addiction is hard for anyone. It can happen to anyone at any given time. It's clearly happening to many, many people who are struggling on our streets. But I'm still optimistic because of the fact that all of us are working together, because of the solutions that we're proposing, because of the things that are important to solving the issue. Just in 2020, over 700 people died. 2021, we saw over 600 people die. This year, so far, a little bit over 300, and unfortunately, we are anticipating there will be more. But those numbers are declining. They're declining because a lot of the work that we are doing to ensure that we support people, we help people, but we also factor in accountability into the solution of that. It's going to take a lot of work, but I know that we'll get there. We'll get there if we stay consistent and we stay persistent in the process of doing what needs to be done. Everyone here had a story to tell. I have a story to tell. I lost a sister to a drug overdose. No, it was not fentanyl, but I did lose a sister in this city the day before she turned 26 to a drug overdose. She was my sister, my younger sister. And so when these people here talk about the families and the people and the folks that we're losing, there's somebody's sister too. There's somebody's mother, father, daughter. They have a story to tell. So what story are we going to tell in our pursuit to ensure that if they need a second chance, there's an opportunity for them to have a second chance? That if they get a second chance, they can even become a member of the Board of Supervisors in this city. That's what this is about. This is about changing and saving lives. And this is about dealing with the destruction in a way that will make people uncomfortable, but is necessary. We can have criminal justice reforms, but we also need to add to that accountability. So I'm looking forward to seeing what we are doing collectively finally take shape in a way that's going to change our city for the better. And with that, we'll open it up to questions.
Mayor Breed, you made some similar promises in December to crack down on drug dealing and drug use. Obviously, we have a new district attorney, but you also mentioned issues around police staffing as to why that didn't have as much of an intended change in the spring as you'd hoped. So what will be different this time with some similar promises?
Well, I actually think what you're saying is somewhat inaccurate. There have been more arrests made since then, and there is more accountability, as the DA talked about, in terms of a number of changes around those who are dealing drugs. But we know that this problem is significant. So it's not as though we're not moving forward. There are changes that we, of course, want to see. We're just not going to see them aggressively at the levels that we all want to see them at. It's going to take time. And yes, police staffing is playing a role, but we're still making the arrests. We're seeing a lot more arrests. We're seeing a lot more accountability, and we're seeing a difference, and we're going to keep at it. And in fact, in this past budget, we anticipate hiring another 200 police officers. We're 540 police officers short, so we definitely need more. That's where balancing our various ambassadors and other programs that we have with eyes and ears and support on the streets, treatment and services, our street crisis response teams, and all of that. It's a combination of things. It's not just law enforcement, but we're making more arrests than we ever have before around this issue, and that definitely is making a difference.
Oh, hi. I was at the event that you put on to clean up 8th and Mission. And my question is that we were also putting up signs saying drug dealers are basically on notice that we are going to be pursuing charges for murder. I watched the dealers read those signs. How are you going to get the message to them even further that this is a serious initiative?
That messaging is really important. We have to follow that through with consistency. We have to follow that through with the arrest that we've been talking about. We have a job to do in terms of arresting people that are out there dealing drugs. And like I said, we're going to take away the excuses. You know, people are warned that we're serious about this. We will make arrests. That same day, our narcotics unit was out there making arrests. And this district attorney is committed to doing what she said she was going to do. So these things take time to kind of catch root, but they will catch root. And I am confident with consistency and persistence, things will get better in terms of that issue. And it's not just the local drug dealers, because we have to get at the networks as well. These dealers have suppliers, their money is, there's a lot that goes into this, and we're trying to work this at every angle. Some investigations take longer than others, but what we need to see is a difference on the street. You were out there Friday. We need to see a difference on the street. If we go out and make 10 arrests or, 10 dealers on the corner, and the people that are living in that community or walking through or driving by don't see a difference on the street, it's important that we make those arrests, but it also has to go with the cleanups and all the other things that we're doing, and we have to sustain that work. Because really, the eye test is what people judge us by. We can throw statistics out all day long. 600 arrests can easily be 1,000 a year from now. But if they're not seeing a difference on the street, we're doing half the work. So we want to combine those arrests, those convictions, with a noticeable difference on the street. And that's where this partnership really plays into what we need to do. It's not just police, it's public health, it's public works, it's homeless and supportive housing, it's the Human Services Agency. We all have to lift on this, because the bottom line is, when it gets down to it, we're talking about human beings that are causing these problems. And I will say this, there needs to be some personal accountability. I said this and I'll say it again, you don't get a pass just because you have a substance disorder. So we have to do all of it, but the persistence will matter.
Christian, how do you work with those who have a fundamentally different view of this issue? There are many in the city who say that we've seen that a war on drugs is unsuccessful. It doesn't work. It's a strategy that people have tried for 40 or 50 years that hasn't worked. How do you have an argument then, or how do you create consensus with somebody who has a fundamentally different view of this and sees this primarily perhaps as a public health issue going forward? How do you reach that common ground with somebody who has a fundamental difference in how you view this issue?
The way I frame it is, we've seen what doing nothing does to our city. When my office decided that it wasn't going to do anything about the problem, we see how the problem got worse and worse and worse, and now is at a crisis point. And so that is what I convey, is that we've got to do something, because doing nothing hasn't gotten us anywhere. And in fact, it has cost us lives. People want to talk about, well, the war on drugs, this, the war on drugs, that. It is a war on fentanyl. It is. When I'm having to give a lesson to my 6-year-old about not eating something that looks like candy because it can kill her, this is absolutely a war on the most lethal drug our street has ever seen. And it is something that we have to take seriously, because our children are dying. Not just those who are choosing to use, but people who don't even know that they're taking it are dying. And now the dealers have decided to try to disguise this drug as something that is attractive to children. And so, yes, we have to do something. There may always be disagreements on the how and the what that we do, but I think accountability comes first, because we have to function in this system to create deterrence. If we don't have a deterrent, then people are just going to keep cycling into San Francisco to keep selling.
Refuse treatment. How are you going to handle that?
And let's let Christian, let's have your follow up.
I was going to say,
and then we'll
President Dorsey, I think you were going to.
okay, and then we'll go right here next.
Just on the political consensus issue, I think that's something that I'm going to be working on the Board of Supervisors. What I think it's important to say is that what's happening in San Francisco is not the war on drugs. What is happening in San Francisco right now is a war on drug addicts. We have just last month surpassed 1,750 San Franciscans who have lost their lives to drug overdoses. So I would challenge people who are committed to just complaining about the solutions to then bring forward solutions. But there are cities, very progressive cities, Amsterdam, Lisbon, Frankfurt, Zurich, Vienna, whose budget, they're wealthy, progressive cities, but their budget per capita is actually lower than San Francisco's. We can solve this problem and do a better job than we're doing without a return to mass incarceration, without a return to the drug war. We are a city that Our civic creed is we are the city that knows how. And I think we can be that again. So that is something that I think right now the moral imperative of the loss of life that we're seeing that is worse than any public health calamity we have seen since the AIDS crisis calls us to respond to rise to the moment. And I'm going to say something else that is the most terrifying thing that is out there. There are synthetic opioids on the East Coast that are Narcan resistant, that are more potent than fentanyl. And God forbid, if one of those comes to San Francisco and takes hold, we will see a loss of life here that's worse than the AIDS crisis. So I think that we have to rise to the moment, and I think it's intellectually lazy to just criticize solutions as a return to the drug war when it's not. So.
Just a few more questions when we go right here.
Some of the toughest critics say the problem's gotten to be as bad as it is because we have enabled those users to stay on the streets. Again, what is the plan for people who refuse treatment?
So I think it depends. It depends on whether or not they have committed a crime. That people only come into my jurisdiction if they've committed a crime, some other type of crime, theft crime or what have you. And so generally our approach is to say, right, we don't believe jail is the solution for you. You have the option of going into drug court. You have the option of even an individualized treatment program that we can give you in lieu of what is the normal sort of punitive approach. And I think most often, at least in my time as being a prosecutor, most of those people choose the treatment. And it doesn't mean that they're successful right out of the gates. We have people fall off the wagon all the time. Some need a different center to go to that works better for them, and you keep trying and you keep holding their hand through this process. But I have found that oftentimes the choice of the punitive or the treatment, people most often choose treatment.
Right down here in the middle.
Thank you. My question has to do with harm reduction approach that has received a lot of attention, outsized attention. It has to do with the Tenderloin Center and then the wellness hubs proposed by the mayor. How does that fit into this overall process? Do you feel that, like the Tenderloin Center, do you think that was a failure or success? What did you learn from it? And how will opening up other types of centers like that connect with the law enforcement activity? And there's just a disconnect between some of those types of activities. I hope you understand my question, but it's
Well, I think I do. First of all, if it were that simple for someone to get off drugs, then people would get off drugs. We know that it's very challenging. Sometimes it takes multiple times, and sometimes it does take force when they go through the criminal justice system for whatever crimes they've committed. But we also have to be realistic about the fact that there are people who use drugs in our city, and they're going to use drugs. And so how do we provide the kind of environment that makes it possible if people are struggling with addiction to get help or treatment, to not be judged, to get met where they are. This is why I support safe consumption sites. I support having them in San Francisco. Unfortunately, we've not been able to do that, and there are a number of complicated reasons why. But ultimately, we have to make sure that we at least have locations for people to go, and that we no longer allow the open air drug using that happens, on our street. So it's going to take a delicate balance. It seems as though they're inconsistent with what we're talking about here. But the fact is, we have so many people who are publicly using drugs without any consequences whatsoever. And that's what we have to stop. And so having wellness centers, having places for people to go and be, that's going to be critical. The center that we opened was a bit overwhelmed with the number of people. And there are a lot of folks who have gotten support, gotten assistance, gotten treatment, gotten transition into housing and other things. Not as many as we had hoped for, but a few nevertheless. However, they can only serve so many people at a time. There are a lot of folks out there struggling for addiction, and having more locations spread out that could provide services and support to those struggling with addiction is why we're making a change.
Chief Scott would like to follow up with that question. We're going to do two more after that. That'll be it.
From our perspective, we have asked Mayor Breed to provide places where our officers can help people get to those places where they can be supported. it's been a difficult road because there are folks out there who, well-intended, who don't want police officers to have any part of that. What I will say here and now and moving forward is people need to get over that. Our officers are out there. We've invested a ton of resources and money into reform to deal with people in crises better. Our officers actually know what they're doing. They do. They have relationships with the very people that we're talking about who need help. And we need to take those excuses away. We are begging for the support when we come in contact with people on the streets who need help. Let us help them get there. Some people say, no, we don't want the police involved in that. We need to be involved in that. And that's where the disconnect is. You have a police department, almost 2,000 officers that can help. We have to allow the officers to do what they've been trained to do. We're not psychologists, we're not doctors. We are trained to deal with people who are hurting, people in need, people in crisis, and we do that very, very well. It doesn't make sense to me. What is wrong with an officer saying, I can be that warm handoff to get people to these beds that the mayor is speaking about? We got to get over that. This department is here to help. We've worked with many, many of the activists and advocacy groups, and we see things eye to eye. What often, where it goes off the rails is, oh, we don't want the police department to be a part of that. As you recall, the debate with the Linkage Center was just that. We don't want the police department to have anything to do with this. It does not make sense. It does not make sense. We're out there, we're dealing with people every day who are hurting out there, and we can't even take them? That makes sense. So we got to get over that. We have to work together, and that's what she's committed to doing. That's what she's driving us to do. That's what I'm committed to doing, and this district attorney is working together. So that's where the disconnect has been, and I hope that people are listening to what I'm saying and what we're all saying. We got to get over the past and let the officers do what they can do, because they can help. Thank you.
Two more questions right here.
Clearly, what you're doing on snatch and grab, your burglaries and robberies have gone down. So something you are doing is correct. But on a bigger scale, the global market, with the drug rings around the world, who's dealing with the big whales that are having these drugs, especially in San Francisco, but in the United States?
You want to talk about the U.S. Attorney?
So the question is about the bigger issue, right?
Yes.
So we have really good partnerships with our federal partners, and when we talk about, this problem goes beyond San Francisco. What we see on the streets really is the tip of the iceberg, and we have to deal with that. We have to see a difference. We have to go out and be consistent in making the arrests, and the district attorney, when we give her and her team the evidence, prosecuting cases, it goes so far beyond that, though, and we know this, and these are cases that we work, the long-term cases, the rings that you described. There are networks, there are people that this is what they do. There are enterprises, so to speak, and we know this to be the case. Our federal partners, the Drug Enforcement Agency, our U.S. Attorney's Office, we are working together on that issue. These cases take time, they take an investment of time, but we have to still do the local enforcement. We have to do the local enforcement while these cases are making their way through the system and being investigated. So that is happening. That's about as much as I can say, but I guarantee you it's happening, and we have seen some results, and we'll continue to see more. But we have really good partnerships, and those partnerships involve everybody standing here and more.
Last question right here.
Yeah, you've spoken about the impact of drug dealing on children in the city. What's your department's strategy for addressing drug dealing near schools?
There are actually laws, statutes on the books about drug dealing near schools, and I am confident with District Attorney Jenkins and her team, every one of those, where it's applicable. Of course, we have to make the arrests, and we have to write the good reports and all that stuff, but enhancements are out there for drug dealing near schools. We have to discourage that as much as the law allows us to do. I don't think any of us want to see our children having to step over drug dealers and come out of their schools. We have safe passages in the Tenderloin where officers have to be posted on street corners so kids can walk from school to home without being walking through, the gauntlet of drug dealers. we do what we have to do to make sure that our children aren't exposed to that, there's more that we must do because it's unacceptable. So yeah, the law allows for enhancements, and it's probably the DA is better suited to talk about that, but we got to give her the ammunition she needs to prosecute and get those enhancements filed.
Thank you.